Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I'm starting a little late today. Had some technical difficulties. All right, so this month, February, is Pet Dental Health Month. And in honor of that, we're going to be doing some material on oral health, dental health for your dog. And we've also just launched our new toothbrushing class, online toothbrushing class, in collaboration with our good friend, Dr. Rachel Zummel, who developed the course materials. She's also our veterinarian. All right, so today I wanted to talk about how dental health might affect behavior. Now, I'm not a veterinarian, and so I'm not speaking from that point of view and with those expertise. What I have here is a little bit from the behavior side, and I did a little bit of a literature review to give an idea of how much of an effect something like a painful mouth might affect your dog. Okay, so first I'm just going to talk a little bit about pain and how it might affect behavior. Then we'll talk about what evidence there is for dental disease or pain in the mouth in particular affecting behavior and how. And then I'll just touch briefly on how you can prevent dental disease in your dog. If you have any questions as I go on, go ahead and put them in the comments below where you're watching this video, and they will pop up for me with just a brief delay. Okay, so why should we care about pain at all when it comes to behavior and training? Obviously, none of us want our dogs to be in pain, but there are very specific ways that that pain can affect our dog's behavior and their ability to make progress in training. So it's worth spending a couple minutes on this. So, one reason that pain can affect your dog's behavior and their responsiveness to training is that some things that either are just a little aversive, say right now, a little unpleasant, or maybe are even neutral to your dog when they're not in pain, can become aversive, or if already unpleasant, can become more aversive once they are experiencing pain. And if that's the case, we might expect to see increased behaviors that are aimed at escaping or avoiding unpleasant stuff. So you might see new or increased aggression or fear, for instance. For an example, and this is actually an example from my own life with my own dogs. Let's take the example of dogs fighting. So this framework might look familiar to you if you've been with us for a while. These are sort of pieces of the puzzle that we can think about when we're framing problem behavior and how to address it. We've got the consequence at the bottom. That's what the dog gets out of the behavior, why they're doing the behavior. The motivation to get that consequence, how valuable is that consequence right now to the dog? And then the trigger, the opportunity, when can I do this behavior to get the consequence? So with dog fights, let's say hypothetically, the trigger or the opportunity for a fight to produce a desired result for the dog is one dog approaches another or touches them. The consequence of the fight can be one of the dogs going away from the other or stopping touching them. And so the motivation that we're interested in here that might be affected by pain is the motivation to get another dog to go away or to stop touching them. Now, when your dog's not in pain, let's say maybe their motivation is like at a 2 out of 10. They're okay with dogs near them. Maybe they don't want a dog jumping on top of them, but their motivation to drive another dog away is relatively low. But now if you've got a dog who's in pain, that motivation might go way up. They really want that other dog to stay away from them, not touch them, and you might see an increase in dog fights in our hypothetical example. And the reason this came to mind for me is that we have two large dogs and a small dog, but our two large dogs occasionally fight, not very often. But several years ago, we all of a sudden, within a week span, I think, had three dog fights that resulted in injuries and bloodshed in our house, which was unusual. And it took me a little while to to notice or to realize that one dog had a very bad ear infection and the other dog had a broken tooth. And as soon as we had those health issues addressed, fights went back to basically, don't think we've had any bad fights since that time several years ago. And I felt really bad that I hadn't noticed the ear infection earlier, but just as an example, of course, I don't know for sure that the pain played into those dog fights, but it seems likely given that they stopped as soon as we had the conditions treated. All right, so that was just an example of how pain might increase various behaviors, especially those we link with fear or aggression, to escape or avoid stuff that our dogs consider aversive, since those aversive things could seem even worse when they're in pain. And you can think of, how that works for humans too. When something's bothering us, say you have a bad headache or a toothache or something, a lot of things could seem more irritating or more aversive than they would if you were feeling fine. All right. Another way that pain could affect your training is that reinforcers, like treats or whatever that you would use to reinforce behaviors you like, those things could become less reinforcing, temporarily at least, which means your dog's going to be less willing and motivated to work for them. So training in particular with positive reinforcement may be less productive because things that normally would function as positive reinforcers for your dog may not when your dog is in pain. So let's take an example of training a skill with food. Here's our little framework again for looking at behavior. We've got our motivation to get a consequence, what they get out of the behavior, and also when does the behavior work to get that consequence. And say we're doing like some mat work, teaching our dog to settle. The opportunity to settle to get treats happens when you ask your dog to settle, lie down, whatever your cue is. What do they get out of it? They get treats. And let's say when your dog isn't in pain, they're pretty motivated by food. They love treats. And so you get a pretty high rate of response to your settle cue because your dog wants those treats. So they're real happy about that. All right. Now, let's say your dog is in pain. You can imagine that their motivation to get treats might be much reduced in this situation. Their appetite might be down. They're just not as into it. And so now the behavior, the frequency of your dog responding to the cue, settle cue may be way down because what they get out of the behavior is not valuable to them right now. I'm also bummed to see that my emojis didn't come through the way that they looked in when I made the slides. All right. So let's look at a little bit of stuff I dug up in the scientific literature about how behavior can change with pain in animals. And this isn't just in dogs. I looked at whatever was out there. So some of this was in cats or mice or livestock. So sometimes an animal in pain will show increased licking or scratching behavior. Interestingly, depending on the animal and the type of pain, you may see decreased overall activity. So the animal is just kind of lying around. Or you can see increased activity, stuff that sounds, at least in the papers I read about this, sounds a little bit more kind of agitated inability to settle down. You may see an increased avoidance of very hot or cold surfaces, increased avoidance of handling, so being touched, restrained, anything like that. You could see decreased interest in new things in general or new animals, new social contacts. This was from a mouse study, which may be of interest to those of you who have dogs who are not friendly with strangers, or friendly with other dogs, but there's an increased frequency and duration of attack behavior when they introduced an unfamiliar animal to the enclosure when the mice were in pain versus not. So increased aggression toward unfamiliar animals. And in that same study, a decreased latency to attack the unfamiliar animal. So there wasn't a lot of lead up. As soon as that new animal was placed in the enclosure, it was on. Now, it was a little bit harder to find specific studies on dental disease. There's some. A lot of these studies, if you decide to dig into it and learn more, You can use Google Scholar as a free search engine for scientific literature. Just a heads up that a lot of the studies are a little bit, maybe a little bit unpleasant to read. There are lots of animal models of human conditions, especially like painful conditions. And in order to study them, pain is being deliberately caused to animals, and that can be difficult to listen to, or to read. So just a heads up on that if you decide to dig into this literature. But let's see what I found looking at how dental pain or oral pain of any kind might affect behavior. So one thing that was pointed out in the veterinary literature repeatedly is that there might not be any noticeable change in behavior when your dog has dental disease. At least some, maybe there's mild stuff, but often owners won't notice anything. And maybe contrary to what you might expect, there's often no decrease in appetite. So even though their mouth is hurting, they still manage to finish their meals. Now, some things you might see, or at least have been seen in some of these studies, are animals picking up food and then dropping it, or chewing on one side of their mouth but not both sides, or chewing just less in general, just kind of swallowing food whole. Of course, some of our dogs do that no matter what. Eating more slowly, so maybe the animal is finishing their meal, but it's taking them longer, maybe because of the change in chewing behavior. Animals who have pain in their mouth or their teeth may avoid being handled, especially around their head, be more hand shy or head shy. This is more, I believe, with more acute pain, but might see more pawing at their mouth or drooling, excessive drooling when there's pain in the mouth. There may be decreased overall activity, especially with severe dental disease in some animals, decreased social and play behaviors. So you see a lot of these are kind of general, like pawing at the mouth. You're like, okay, yeah, I can see that being linked to dental pain. But a lot of this stuff is a little more non-specific to the mouth. Increased hiding. This was especially seen in cats in the studies I looked at. Decreased grooming behavior. And again, increased aggression. Oh, and this is just for those of you watching this later. I'm not going to leave this up that long, but you can grab a screenshot if you want a few of the citations, if you want to read up on them. This is not exhaustive by any means, and I couldn't fit all the papers here that I looked at, but here are just some representative ones. Okay, so I hope I've convinced you that there are quite a lot of ways in which pain, including oral or dental pain, might have negative effects on your dog's behavior. So how can we prevent dental disease then? Well, there are quite a few at-home products you can buy just, over the counter, online, at your pet store that are advertised to improve oral health, like dental chews. There's some water additives. There are diets. At-home dental care, like toothbrushing, that's really the gold standard, has been shown to greatly improve dental health. And of course, full, proper cleanings, dental cleanings, which need to be done under anesthesia at your veterinarian's office, are important. Even if your dog is in pretty good health, their mouth is in pretty good shape, this should still happen at least periodically. For small dogs, I'm told now the recommendation is every year. And in fact, 2 of our 3 dogs are currently at the veterinarian right this second getting dental cleanings. So we do have a free webinar that we put up this month for Pet Dental Health Month that addresses the at-home products. If you're wondering which dental chews have evidence to back them up, which water additives, how do I avoid wasting money on stuff that won't work? This is the link to that free webinar. It's not too long. It's given by a veterinarian. And you might enjoy that. We all wish there were easier, I wish I could just give my dog a chew and it would fix everything. Of course, it's not that easy. But there are some chews and water additives and things that have some research to back them up to improve dog dental health. Now, when you watch this webinar, you'll also get the link to our new toothbrushing course, which I think I also put on social media and YouTube under this video recording. We have a it's kind of self-study short toothbrushing class that has some live support for you if you are starting from a point where you can't handle your dog's mouth very easily, or even if you can, but you can't get the brushing going. We're going to cover all that stuff in that course. All right, and there, as usual, all the ways to find us online: website, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. If you have any questions about the stuff I've covered today, behavior and pain, behavior and dental disease, and sort of pain in the mouth and muzzle area, or the preventing dental disease, which I just touched on, that's something you can talk with your vet more about. You can check out the free webinar I linked. And we'd love to have you in the toothbrushing class as long as your dog has had their mouth examined by a veterinarian, I'd say in the last year, just to make sure that toothbrushing is recommended. It is almost always recommended, but if your dog has a lot of pain, say they have really bad periodontal disease or broken teeth, anything that would cause a lot of pain, those things would need to be taken care of before we start training for toothbrushing. Because if they're in pain, the training is going to be really tough to make progress in. All right, folks. As always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. We'll be doing various dental things for the rest of the month. Our dogs have agreed to review some dental chews for you. It's toothpaste and toothbrushes, so we'll do some of that. And I will be back next week with more. All right. Have a great week, and I will see you online.